I am delighted to be joined by one of the fiercest anti-war voices in the country. She puts her money where her mouth is because she's always out there protesting across administrations, Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter. Code Pink's Medea Benjamin. Medea, how have you been holding up during this pandemic?
Oh, I've been pretty good, but like everybody else, can't wait till this is over.
Yep, I know. So I thought of you. Biden is obviously staffing up his administration. For the most part, a lot of the usual corporate suspects. Some of them from Clinton's days. A lot of them from Obama's days. But you and Code Pink and others were fiercely fighting to oppose Michelle Flournoy, who was Undersecretary for Defense under Obama. Very right wing and kind of we'll talk about a bit of a shadow lobbyist, I would say, for defense contractors. So I guess ultimately there's a mini victory. It was Lloyd Austin that was named defense secretary. I guess a victory. Can you tell us about Lloyd Austin, who, I guess you could say some history, will be the first black defense secretary?
Yes, there's controversy already over his pick for several reasons. One, because he is a general, and there's supposed to be a civilian in charge of the Pentagon. This goes back to a 1947 law. There's only been two waivers in our history. One was under Truman, and the other was under Trump when General Mattis waiver. There are a number of groups, including some veterans groups like Common Defense, who have come out strongly and saying there's real reason to have this separation. And they think that the Senate should not give the General Austin. And then there's other issues. There's issues that Central Command, while the U.S. was bombing the heck out of Iraq, and there's issues about him being on the board of Raytheon. During this time, he only took a couple of months after he retired from the Pentagon to join the board of Raytheon. And during this time, it was when we're buying Raytheon bombs and bombing the heck out of Yemen, which is still going on. So, and then he is also a partner, this private equity firm, Pine Island Capital, that Michelle Flournoy was part of, that is heavily invested in military industries. So there are a number of reasons why we can't be happy with General Flournoy. I must say, with General Flournoy, that was a that was a mistake with General Austin. And I must say, I'm not happy. I am happy that Michelle Flournoy is not going to be Secretary of State. But when we were given choices between Austin, Michelle Flournoy, and the other one who was under major consideration, Jay Johnson, who was head of Homeland Security under Obama, as well as in the Pentagon when the legal justification for the use of killer drones, and he's on a weapons company. It's hard to be of them became Secretary of Defense.
And the interesting thing to me is, basically, Lloyd Austin seems like he's just typical, follow the orders, kind of a company man, so to speak, in terms of the military-industrial complex. But he was, in some regards, to even Obama. Can you kind of talk about that?
Well, yes, there were instances in which he was to the right of Obama, for example, on Afghanistan. But then there are also instances in which he really back from the right, like from McCain, who wanted more involvement of U.S. forces in the case of Syria and wanted a no-fly zone in Syria. He also, under Obama, did not initially the withdrawal of troops that Obama wanted, but in the end he oversaw the withdrawal of about 50,000 troops, which means he is experienced in bringing troops home. And that could be a very good thing if we indeed get Biden to approve of bringing the troops home from Afghanistan and Iraq. But this military-industrial complex also is a congressional one. And even when Trump said he wanted to reduce the number of troops in those two countries to 2,500, Democrats and Republicans in Congress went nuts and said, no, you can't possibly bring troops home. That's too sudden, precipitous. After 18 years, it's precipitous. So Biden as well will face pushback. One of the things that some people are saying would not be terrible about General Austin is indeed that he is a yes man. He is a soldier. And if we can get Biden to be trying to end these endless wars and not get us into new ones, that somebody like General Austin would listen to those orders and carry them out.
Right. And in terms of, I mean, everybody, the media particularly, have been so fixated on Trump's for the last 5 years. Has there been a lot of attention on, like, I don't know, the 9 or 10 countries we're involved with at one time? Can you kind of remind people, we know about, obviously, Afghanistan, we're going on 20 years. We still have people in Iraq, Yemen. Can you kind of talk about what General Austin will be stepping into and all the countries we are currently either have ground troops there or are aiding other countries in interfering?
Well, if you look where we have counterterrorism forces, it's all over the world, and we have them in Somalia and Sudan and other parts of Africa. In fact, AFRICOM has grown tremendously under Trump. Trump has lifted the restrictions on a lot of the use of U.S. forces. He's also made it less transparent what the U.S. is doing, so it's harder for us, the citizens who are paying for all of this, to know what's going on. There is a lot that needs to be rolled back. And let's not forget that we have over 800 military bases around the world. And Trump there also started questioning, why do we have all these troops in Europe, for example, and started to pull troops back from Germany. Now, some of them he just repositioned in a worse place in Poland, which would make it more antagonistic to Russia. But in other instances, he wanted to bring some of them home. And again, both the Republicans and Democrats in Congress got out there and said, no. In fact, they put an amendment that passed on the National Defense Authorization Act to say no money could be used to bring these forces home. So, yes, the U.S. military is spread out all over the world. And this is something that General Austin, if indeed we as a movement can use our pressure under Biden. You know, under Trump, we didn't have any leverage because Trump was so erratic and all these decisions were pretty much made by him. And so where were you going to put your pressure? You know, how do you reach Donald Trump? Now we have much more of an ability. And unlike during the Obama years when the anti-war movement just fell apart because we didn't want to protest the first black president, in this case, so many people voted for Biden because it was anti-Trump, not because they like Biden, and are ready to pressure him. And we've seen that just now as you started out this segment talking about the pressure to stop Michelle Flournoy. I mean, it was quite remarkable how we were able to get together a lot of not only anti-war groups, but also in this case, we went out to feminists, from Gloria Steinem to Eve Ensler to Jane Fonda, and we got almost 100 prominent women in the course of 48 hours to come out and say a war hawk at the head of the Defense Department is not a gain for feminists. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of excitement about using our pressure. Two areas where we really want to focus on with Biden is immediately to stop the U.S. support for the war in Yemen and to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal.
And can you kind of talk about, because it seems to me Biden, I mean, we know the Democratic Party has been using identity politics as a quasi-weapon forever, but it's on steroids right now. I mean, listen, I'm a white guy. I think it's great that we have a black defense secretary, now a Hispanic health and human services secretary, but at the end of the day, I don't really care if they're glow in the dark, if they're warmongers or corporatists. But it really seems like the media is going along with this, only focusing on color or gender and whatnot, and there's really zero attention on the actual record.
Well, that's right. And this, this contest around the Secretary of Defense has just been horrific in that regard. At first, it was considered that Michelle Flournoy was a shoo-in, and there were many different women who were celebrating how wonderful this would be to break the glass ceiling and have a woman as the first head of the Secretary of Defense. And it's ridiculous when you had a woman who was just the epitome of everything wrong with the military-industrial complex, from her sitting on the board of defense contractors to her creating these war hawk think tanks that get money from the weapons industry, to her positions on supporting every single war the U.S. has been in post 9/11, as well as her writings about how the U.S. has the right to unilaterally intervene in any country around the world if we feel that they have key resources or markets that we need. And then the Black Caucus came out and said, no, we think that it should be a black Secretary of Defense. That's more important than a woman. And that went on for the last week with the clamor from within the Black Caucus. And as you said, in the end, who cares? It is not about gender and it's not about color, it's about positions. And we feel that all the positions that were being discussed in the Biden transition team were not people that we supported for this. So it's because all we could do is mount a campaign against this one and mount a campaign against the other one. But when you're not given any options that are really things you can be for, that makes it very difficult. And then he nominated Anthony Blinken for Secretary of State very early on. And we knew that was coming because Anthony Blinken has been with him for decades. So it wasn't possible for us to mount any kind of opposition to that. But there so far is not anybody in this national security group that he's brought together that has any fresh thinking, that recognizes the world has changed, that unlike what Biden says, that the U.S. has to be regaining its seat at the head of the table, there is no head at the table now. The Chinese are of equal importance in the world. There are other blocs that now are equally important. There needs to be a round table that we all sit at to discuss these issues. And that the U.S. can't be flexing its muscle against the Chinese when we need to cooperate with them on the pandemic, on the climate crisis, on all kinds of things, and that we can't afford to use the myth that the Chinese are a great enemy as a justification to invest even more in the Pentagon budget when we have so many other real needs. But I don't see anybody coming into the administration, nor Biden himself, that has a realistic view of what the world is like now and what the U.S. foreign policy needs to be. In the meantime, those of us who put up this fight against Flournoy were labeled as far left, extremist, hysterical, unrealistic, when we are the ones who have the most realistic version of our foreign policy, which is we should have never gotten into the war in Iraq, we should bring our troops out of the Middle East, and we need to dramatically cut the Pentagon budget and free up those resources for the needs like universal health care.
And my last question, I don't know, right now they're all penny pinching stimulus. We're now being offered $900 billion, which I think is a shit sandwich. Even before it wasn't enough, $1,200 checks, yet, I don't know, I'm seeing reports they're approving new F-37 jets, they're approving all these new weaponry. There's no debate about that. There's no penny pinching on that. It's the never-ending military-industrial complex. But meanwhile, the media and others basically fixate on whether it's too much to have $900 billion versus $1.8 trillion, while you have food lines all over the country.
That's right. And as we speak, the Congress is passing a new Pentagon budget, which is even bigger than the last one, bigger than our 10 other top countries combined. And as you say, there's no question about why we need to be putting all those resources when there is no country today that is really threatening us at all, and that our biggest threats don't come certainly from the war on terror, which should be erased now from our vocabulary. The threats are coming from things like the pandemic and like the climate crisis. So yes, it is too bad that we are so skewed in the way that we're spending our resources, where the majority of our discretionary funds are going to the Pentagon, and so little discussion about that. The discussion around this Pentagon budget has been around little amendments here and there that we could add, rather than the essence of all that money going into the black hole of the weapons industry, or what we should really call it, the merchants of death.
Medea Benjamin, can't wait to get back out there and see you being, I remember, I'll never forget it, I think it was the DNC or the RNC, you were being carried out by your legs, and I just remember that image. I was watching it from down there. Always putting your body on the line to fight what is just immoral occupation all over the country at the expense of American citizens and citizens across the world. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Jordan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com, where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.